Super, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar of the Water Rights webinar series brought to you by the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, together with the Mail and Guardian and End Water Poverty. Today's webinar is entitled Provincial Intervention in Municipal Crisis, Lessons from Makana. My name is Lisa Chamberlain, and I'm from Wits University in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'll be facilitating the webinar today, assisted by my colleague Kelebogile Kuno from SERI, who will be coordinating the chat for us. Just a couple of housekeeping issues up front. Please feel free to type your name and your organization into the chat so that we can all just get a sense of who's with us, because otherwise you'll just see the attendees as the panelists. And please also type any questions or comments that you have into the chat as we go. And once we get to the discussion part of the seminar, Kelebogile will collate those for us and we'll put as many of the questions as possible to our panelists. So panelists, feel free to switch your cameras off at the moment while you're not speaking, and then I'll introduce you a little later on and you can switch your cameras on for your presentations. The series of webinars is based on SERI's Claiming Water Rights in South Africa research project, which examines how water rights are being claimed with a view to drawing lessons from the work of communities and civil society organizations in a diverse range of circumstances. We've already launched 2 case studies which dealt with various aspects of water services provision on privately owned land. Today we shift gears to focus on what happens when the municipality tasked with the provision of water is just incapable of providing it. The story begins when, at the time that the South African Constitution was drafted, it was deemed essential to have a mechanism to prevent serious operational or financial problems inhibiting the effective functioning of local government. However, this had to be done sensitively and in a way which aligned with government policy introduced after South Africa's transition to democracy, which positioned local government as independent and autonomous. Importantly, however, this local government autonomy is not unlimited, because provincial and national government are given supervisory powers to ensure that municipalities effectively manage their financial affairs and deliver basic services. As part of this oversight system, Section 139 of the Constitution provides for provincial intervention into municipal affairs. Provincial intervention is then further fleshed out in the Local Government Municipal Finance Management Act. It's a mechanism which is being increasingly used in South Africa, including in Makana. In 2005, Makana local municipality in the Eastern Cape received an award for excellence in service delivery. It had financial reserves of more than 50 million rand and 350 employees. Just 10 years later, by 2014, the municipality was bankrupt. It owed over 150 million rand and the number of employees had risen to over 1,500. Today, Makana is a municipality in crisis. It has faced various challenges related to service delivery, administration, and finances, many of which have recurred over long periods of time. The crisis has been characterized by water outages, water quality problems, near non-existent road maintenance, failure to collect refuse timeously, and the inability to manage waste sites and illegal dumping. In addition, municipal infrastructure has been aging and the municipality has huge debts, which it is unable to settle. Water supply across the municipality, and in Makanda in particular, has been crippled by a combination of aging infrastructure desperately in need of repairs and a severe drought over the past 4 years, which has almost emptied a number of dams on which Makanda relies for its water supply. In response to the effective collapse of Makana municipality, the Eastern Cape Provincial Executive Council has intervened a number of times over the years. There have been 2 formal interventions in terms of Section 139 of the Constitution. But amid growing concerns that neither of these interventions had resulted in much change, community activists led by the Unemployed People's Movement began to advocate with increasing vigor for the dissolution of the Municipal Council and eventually turned to the Makanda High Court. In January this year, the court confirmed that Makana municipality was in breach of its constitutional service delivery obligations and directed the province to dissolve the Makana Municipal Council. This is part of what makes this judgment so significant. Provincial intervention as a mechanism is used quite a lot, but it very rarely includes the most drastic step, which is dissolving the Municipal Council. And certainly this is the first time that a court has ordered a provincial government to take this step. Both the municipality and provincial government launched an application for leave to appeal, which was refused by the High Court. But the municipality has subsequently petitioned the Supreme Court of Appeal, which has granted it leave to appeal. The judgment from the High Court is the first of its kind in South Africa and is the product of a long and painful struggle by the people of Makana, spanning more than a decade, and which is by no means over. And while as part of this project, we examined Makana as a case study in the context of research into claiming water rights, it really is a story which connects the dots between various kinds of service provision. For example, in addition to the court case that we'll talk about today about provincial intervention, the Legal Resources Centre have run a number of other service delivery cases, one in January this year about sewage and another about waste collection, which was launched just a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, however, Makana municipality is not an outlier, but is situated within a systemic picture of local government collapse across the country. Although there are multiple factors contributing to this, the poor and deteriorating state of municipal finances and financial management is a critical contributor. In the 2018-2019 financial year, 113 municipalities adopted unfunded budgets, meaning that they had plans to spend money that they did not have. Clearly, the need for solutions to municipal collapse is urgent. Nevertheless, while Section 139 interventions are the solution offered by the Constitution, there is just very little evidence that they work. Which is why today we want to do three things. Firstly, we want to unpack how provincial intervention in terms of Section 139 of the Constitution works. Secondly, we want to highlight some of the challenges associated with such interventions. And then thirdly, we want to draw lessons from the Makana experience, which can be used by both community activists and state actors when future provincial interventions are contemplated. To help us do this, we have a wonderful collection of 4 experts on our panel. First up is Dr. Tracy Ledger, who's a senior researcher and program lead at the Public Affairs Research Institute, where she focuses on institutional failure in local government. Importantly for our discussion today, she is also the co-author of Mind the Gap, which is a 2019 report which comprehensively analyzes the mechanism of Section 139 interventions. Secondly, we'll have Pam Yako, who is a public sector specialist who has served in various government capacities, including as Director General of the then Department of Water Affairs and Forestry. She's now a consultant specializing in institutional reform and municipal capacity building. And we've invited her to join us today, particularly because she also had the unenviable job of being the first administrator appointed by the provincial government as part of its Section 139 intervention in Makana. Pam will be followed by Ayanda Kota, who's an experienced activist from Makanda. In 2009, he co-founded the Unemployed People's Movement and was elected its first chairperson and currently serves as its spokesperson. UPM has played a very significant role in the human rights landscape in South Africa and spearheaded the litigation which resulted in the judgment that we're talking about today. And then last but not least, we'll have Athandiwe Saba, a multi-award-winning journalist from the Mail and Guardian, who's passionate about data, human interest issues, governance, and everything that isn't on social media. So in terms of format, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to present their input in turn. And panelists, I'm going to ask you to keep very strictly to 15 minutes max. So I'm going to be that person that interrupts you if we're running low on time. And after that, we're going to open the floor to questions. So with that underway, Tracy, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Lisa. Hello, everyone. I'm going to do a short presentation which covers the contents of a report that we did, and then I'll put a link for the report in the chat if you want to go and read the report. Oh, it says the host is disabled screen sharing. Right, so I won't share my screen then. All right, we'll have a chat about the report. Yes?
Please go ahead and share.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Tracy.
Great. All right. So just a background to the research to tell you what we did. What we did is we had a look at every single Section 139 intervention that had been done since 1998 up until the middle of 2018. And really, we wanted to know 2 questions. The first one was, could the interventions be considered a success? And the second part of the question was, if not, why not? And in order to see if the interventions had been a success or not, we looked at a range of financial and operational data from 2 years before the intervention, during the intervention, and after the intervention. And then we spent some time in some municipalities that had multiple interventions to try and understand what had been going on. So we looked at 140 interventions in total, 15 of which were set aside, so 125 went ahead. Almost all of these were in terms of section 139(1)(b), which is important for the rest of the presentation. And the short answer is the vast majority of these failed to deliver any long-term or sustainable improvement in the municipality. And in fact, a considerable number of municipalities were in a worse shape after the intervention than they had been before the intervention. It's useful to think about the history of Section 139 and how and why we ended up with it in its particular form, because the history of the section is responsible for a lot of the problems that we've seen. Okay, so there were 2 iterations of Section 139. The first one, which was Section 139(1), was included in the 1996, the first version of the Constitution. And it was based on this understanding that local government played a critical role in the national developmental agenda, and secondly, that national government was never going to stand as a guarantor of local government debt. You were never going to get a bailout if you were a local municipality in the same way that you might if you were SAA, for example. So what was needed was a mechanism to ensure that if a local municipality failed to fulfill its various constitutional obligations, that something could be done about that. So it's very important to understand that Section 139 was based very clearly on the understanding that there was no limitless autonomy to a local municipality, that there was always some kind of line in the sand beyond which a municipality would not be allowed to go if it was undermining its constitutional obligations and the constitutional rights of the people who lived there. Section 139(1) dealt with the failure to fulfill an executive obligation. And there's been some debate about what an executive obligation means, but the courts have interpreted it to mean essentially the powers and functions of local municipalities. So a good example would be, for example, the failure of a municipality to supply water in the way that the Constitution says. That would be a failure to fulfill an executive obligation, but these were discretionary interventions. So it was at the discretion of the province whether they would intervene in the municipality or not. So in theory, the province could look the other way and simply allow the municipality to continue with what it was doing. Now, what happened in the years after this first iteration of Section 139 is National Treasury became more and more concerned that this statute was inadequate to deal with serious financial problems in municipalities. As Lisa was saying, it's very often financial problems that are at the heart of service delivery problems. So what happened in 2003 is that there was an amendment to Section 139, which added sections 4, 5, 6, and 7. And Section 139, 4, and 5, as we'll discuss just now, were specifically to deal with financial issues. And very importantly, they were mandatory interventions. So if a municipality was in deep financial trouble, it was then compulsory to intervene. But the important thing about this is that essentially what this means is that both COGTA and Treasury are responsible for the implementation of Section 139. And what has happened in practice is that Section 139(1), which for most people, including I'm sure a lot of people at this webinar, is what they think of as a Section 139 intervention, has become the COGTA remedy, and Section 139, 4, and 5 have become the Treasury remedy. So what does Section 139 say? Well, as we said, Section 139(1) is the failure to fulfill an executive obligation. It's a discretionary intervention. The province doesn't have to intervene if it doesn't think the problem is so serious. And the courts have interpreted this to mean a failure in a particular service delivery area. Section 139(4) talks about the failure of a municipality to pass a budget, and Section 139(5) deals with serious financial problems in a municipality. And it's important to note that if a municipality is unable to deliver services because of an underlying serious financial problem, then the correct remedy is Section 139(5), because that addresses the underlying cause of the problem, and not Section 139.1, which would address the symptom of the problem. Now, the thing here is that Section 139.4 and 5 are not discretionary interventions. If a municipality meets the requirements of a serious financial problems, the statute says quite clearly the province must intervene. Section 139.7 says if the province fails to intervene, national must intervene, which has been taken to mean that National Treasury must intervene. So obviously, the critical point here is that it's very important to correctly diagnose the underlying problem in the municipality in order to ensure that the correct remedy is applied. If the real problem in the municipality is that it's basically bankrupt, then intervening to try and fix the water delivery is not going to fix the underlying problem. But what we've seen instead is that almost every single intervention has been done in terms of Section 139.1, when our research has shown that actually that's not the case. So what has gone wrong with all of these interventions? Why do we have this very high failure rate? Well, we've summarized it in 6 things, and I'll deal with some of these things in detail and not with some of the others. The interventions come too late. The wrong sections are being implemented. Linked to that is the fact that executive obligation has been misinterpreted. Administrators are being used incorrectly in situations when they should not be in the municipalities. And all of the parties, provinces, National Cogta, National Treasury, are negligent in their mandatory obligations. Now, one of the most important things that we found is that the interventions are coming way, way, way too late. They are taking place when the municipalities have been in a state of total collapse for an extended period of time. We've been in a municipality where the problems were so serious that before an intervention took place, every single movable asset in that municipality had been repossessed twice by the municipality's creditors. The only reason that municipality had a desk or a chair or a computer was because a local mining company had lent them to them. There wasn't one single working water meter in that municipality, and that was before the intervention. And the reason for this is that the autonomy and the independence of local government is cited as the reason why interventions must be the last fact. The fact of the matter is that the autonomy and independence of local government is a complete and utter fiction. The word autonomous and independent in respect of a sphere of government does not appear anywhere in the Constitution, anywhere in the Intergovernmental Relations Framework, or in any of the supporting legislation. What the Constitution says is that we have 3 equal and interdependent spheres of local government. There's no such thing as an autonomous and independent local municipality. But this has become an urban legend, which is then used as an excuse to basically trample on people's constitutional rights. And it's the reason why interventions are coming too late. This was never the intention of the statute. The intention of the statute was to ensure that municipalities never ended up in a situation where all of their assets had been repossessed, where nothing worked. The municipalities that reach this state of collapse face a very long battle for recovery. There is not national funds available for a bailout, and inevitably it's the poorest and most vulnerable people in that municipality that pay the price. For a municipality, it can take 5, 6, 7 years for a municipality to get itself back on its feet, during which time it has to reduce service deliveries, increase rates. Earlier interventions generally mean better results. And the important point to make there as well is that if there are serious financial problems in a municipality, the kind of problems that were present in the municipality I was talking about earlier, for 3 years before the intervention, there isn't supposed to be any political discretion. You aren't supposed to say, yes, well, we know everything's falling apart and they meet all the requirements for a collapsed financial state, but well, they're independent, let's give them a chance. The legislation says quite clearly that if the municipality meets these conditions, it is compulsory for an intervention. The problem is that everybody who's supposed to respect that is simply looking the other way. The wrong sections are being applied, and mostly what is happening is Section 139.1 interventions are being implemented when they should be Section 139.5 interventions. When we looked at those 140 municipalities where there were interventions, particularly in the last 5 years, the vast majority of those were municipalities that qualified for Section 139.5 interventions, not Section 139.1 interventions. But this is because Section 139.1 interventions have become the the COGTA intervention. So this is where what everybody thinks a Section 139 intervention is. I mean, sometimes I think nobody's actually read the statute past Section 139(2). And the court has ruled that even if there are serious service delivery problems in a municipalities, if these are caused by financial problems, the correct remedy is Section 139(5). So the wrong section is being applied, and then we have an inappropriate remedy. And part of this has been because Treasury has been largely missing in action. It is their responsibility to intervene if the province fails to in the event of serious financial problems. As I said, everybody shares some of the blame for this. The provinces have got the primary responsibility to make the correct diagnosis, and in this they are failing. They're saying Section 139 1B, failure to fulfill an executive obligation, which has become shorthand for nothing in the municipality works, and this is completely incorrect. National COGTA and the National Council of Provinces are supposed to exercise oversight over these decisions. They are also failing to do so. These are the people that should be saying, you haven't done a proper diagnosis. And I think in this instance, the Tshwane judgment is important, because one of the things in that judgment is the court said that actually when a province wants to do an intervention that is on the basis of the failure to fulfill an executive obligation, they must detail exactly what executive obligation has not been fulfilled. Instead of the current thing now, everything's falling apart, so we're doing a Section 139. One. As I've said, in respect of serious financial problems, there's a mandatory obligation to intervene. Provinces are not doing so. If the provinces fail to initiate Section 139(5), National Treasury is supposed to do so in terms of Section 139(7). They are also failing to do so. It really is a group effort that has contributed to the current state of affairs. Just briefly, we've got a powerful and effective tool to prevent municipal collapse, but we're not using it properly. There are a number of things that we need to do to make Section 139 work the way it was supposed to. I mean, I think the first thing we need to do is stop with this nonsense that local government is an autonomous and independent sphere of government, because nowhere does it say that. And certainly we can't have a situation where a local council is supposedly being granted some super rights that supersede those of everyone who live there. So we need more clarity on executive obligation. We need a correct use of the correct sections based on accurate diagnosis, and we need much sooner interventions and better oversight of what sections are selected. The National Council of Provinces has really not fulfilled any kind of meaningful oversight role in this respect, and that needs to be overseen. We need the appropriate use of administrators. Section 139 never intended that an administrator would take over all of the executive functions of a municipality while the council was still sitting. What the statute says is that an administrator is appointed if the council is dissolved until a new council is appointed. What Section 139(1) says, it doesn't say you can appoint an administrator to take over all of the functions of the municipality while the council is still sitting. What it says is that the province may take responsibility for that particular executive obligation where the municipality is not fulfilling its obligations. So what we're doing is we're sending in administrators for 1, 2, 3 years to go and run an entire municipality while the council is still in place, when this was absolutely never ever the intention of the legislation. And this is creating a huge amount of problems. It's impossible for one person to try and cover all of the problems in the municipality. Where administrators need to be used is where the council has been dissolved, and only for that short period of time until they are reinstated. We need one inclusive piece of legislation. There was the IMSI bill kind of came to life, half died, came back to life again. But it seems that there are moves afoot to improve the quality of that legislation to include these issues. Right, I'm going to stop there, and I'll share the link to the report in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Tracy. for helping us to unpack what is quite a complicated legislative regime and constitutional regime, and for giving us the systemic picture of Section 139 interventions, bleak as they may be. I think you've ended off on a great point for Pam to pick up on, which is around the role of administrators. And so I'll hand over to Pam to give us a take from the inside about what it was like to serve as the first provincial administrator in Makana. Over to you, Pam.
Thanks, Lisa, and morning, everyone. Just a couple of points to make. I don't have a presentation, so I've got just a few points to make. The one point to make is that most of the things that Tracy referred to with regard to what leads to the failure of or the lack of success of the interventions is that they were all present in Makana. In those related to interpretation of the law, the powers of the administrator, the time at which the intervention happened, the capacity within the municipality, and all of those things were all present. And so the reality is that the intervention, until you deal, which I think in the last slide or second last slide, she deals with what can be done, was a bit problematic. One of the things that I did do when I first started was to start raising the issue of the terms of reference of the administrator. And like from two perspectives, if you look at the original terms of reference, that were the administrator terms of reference included one of the roles of the administrator, and I think it has happened in many other places. I know of the Eastern Cape, but I think in other provinces as well, there was the role of being the municipal manager. Now, a municipal manager reports to council. Okay, so there was this intervention by province in a municipality by putting an administrator who was supposed to be a representative of a province in taking over an executive obligation, and that administrator is appointed to be, amongst others, the municipal manager. So there's a problem to start with in law. So we worked on that, and then the terms of reference were changed, which raised another problem, which I think Tracy has already covered, and that is then the use of a 1B, which means that there was, even though there was an improvement in the fact that the administrator did not report to council, but the administrator was sharing power with council, because to make other things work, the administrator needed to make sure that you have the concurrence of council on some of those things. And those include budget, appointment of the municipal manager. Those are critical in terms of the success of that intervention, because what the council, as we learned later, and a matter that went to court later on, there's been a couple of occasions that the council had, for example, on the appointment of there were two appointments that the administrator disagreed with council. The one was on the municipal manager, which I had a different view of who the person to be appointed. And interestingly, in Makana, the municipal manager was appointed, notwithstanding that the administrator who was chairing the interview said there was no suitable candidate. They still went ahead, and political parties, all of them across the board, voted for that decision against what the administrator was saying. So that was that is the first thing. And so for me, the second appointment related to the director of technical services. And the administrator in this instance had also said there is no suitable candidate. With the second one, okay, the matter went to court on the first one, and it has been going to various courts, taken an appeal. At least the province sided with the administrator on this issue, and national government as well. But on the issue of the Director Technical Services, I think this is material in terms of the Makana intervention, because the Director of Technical Services, the people that I did interview and found them not to be suitable. And the director, when I left, guess who got appointed? This one of the Director of Technical Services who was in charge, who did not make it when I was there. So there was an issue, there was something else at play, apart from the law, which is what Tracy has covered. There was also no interest, especially from the council side, to stop what the challenges were that were faced by the municipality. Because if you are going to appoint someone who did not have, and had gone through an appointment process, that the previous administrator had said this is not a suitable candidate, and that is made a suitable candidate, is something else. One of the things that one had recommended in terms of what needed to be done, I left the municipality, apart from I think what has been spoken to is the financial recovery plan that I developed. But in my exit report, section 5.17 of that report, I deal with water issues specifically, in addition to the financial recovery plan. In terms of that, there were a couple of things that needed, that I recommended. One was that there had to be to sort out the challenge of water, which Tracy's point that things are left too late. We needed an investment of 400 million. And that money was never, to my knowledge, was never put, so it was never invested in Makana. Secondly, that the process that we followed in looking at the roadmap, we involved communities. So there was a process that involved communities, the rest of the Makana community in working out the water, how do you solve the water problem roadmap? And thirdly, there was an element in my report about ensuring that you do keep the support that was being provided and the contract that was being run by Amatola Water. Why is Amatola Water material here? Because internally, including the candidate that was appointed as a director, subsequently to lead the process, was required to keep the process moving. What were the challenges that I face? Okay. Which is the second question. Firstly, by the time I joined, I became the administrator, there was a serious trust deficit between the community and the council. In fact, to try and get them in one room, it was a nightmare. But we worked through that and we managed to get what we called a service delivery in summit. And that summit was also looking at a common agenda in working out what needs to happen. And in that summit, there was a common purpose. There were a couple of signatories from civil society, signatory from the council, signatory from Rhodes University, which is a big ratepayer in Makanda, and a signatory from provincial government. And all of those committed to the turnaround and what needed to happen. But again, which is the next issue, which is the pushback from councillors. It was amazing how much councillors apart from signing the thing because they did not want to participate in the processes until very late in my tenure. The third point I would like to raise as a challenge was a financial one, much as which I think from Tracy's contribution is that it is too late and the municipal finances have collapsed. So an administrator, even if you were to use the right section, even if you were to disband that council, by the time an intervention is made, so you could dissolve the council and elect a new council within 3 months, as the law says. But you're not going to deal with the systemic problems and the financial challenges that, because the municipality have been allowed to go into a state of collapse. So a kind of political solution is to a certain extent correct. I support that in terms of the type of intervention. But the reality is that without the financial muscle that will make sure that, because if the municipality has collapsed, it has collapsed. And in just for water, we needed 400 million, let alone everything else that could have done. A new council, where would they have generated a 400 million to address the water challenges? So you need to put money into it. And lastly, one other challenge, which I've also alluded to, as the issue of power sharing. So what could be done in the 4 minutes that I have left? One, I think Tracy has spoken extensively about using the right legal instruments, okay? So, and understanding of the law, because if you still had an approval of terms of reference of an administrator to also be a municipal manager, someone somewhere doesn't understand the law, okay? Secondly, financial, I think you have to look at, firstly, timely intervention, and what the there is no way you can do it without some kind of financial injection. There was some money put in by provincial Chapter, but that was not enough. It was just to keep the thing going, but you needed just on water 400 million. And therefore, if you do not address that issue, the intervention would have been useless. And lastly, I would like to make a point about all of government, because what tends to happen, in my view, or what my own assessment, and Tracy can comment on this because she's done a study, is that what tends to happen, the intervention is seen as a Chapter intervention, as opposed to the rest of provincial government. The provincial government, different parts, okay, we did see elements in Makana, because I kept on knocking on various doors. There was a treasury input in terms of making funds available and assisting in Makana, especially with regard to water, and they also funded the development of the financial recovery plan. The provincial Chapter did bring in money, and the Department of Water Affairs, again, through going to the minister and appealing that the minister plays a role in ensuring that we address the water challenges. She then seconded officials that helped us develop the roadmap, and also attended the Indaba and funded 1 or 2 projects from the RBIC program. So you do need all of government, but there were other components in government that didn't play a role, to start within the provincial government and also national government, that could have played a role in making sure that these interventions help. So I guess in closing, in the 1 minute that I do have, I think that I concur that if you are going to have an intervention, make sure that the preconditions are right. Secondly, create the necessary support infrastructure to make sure that the administrator is supported, and get the rest of government or all of government to intervene. And lastly, that the intervention must be timeless. Thank you very much.
Pam. A whole bunch of food for thought there, and a number of kind of key issues that you've raised, both that really solidify the points that Tracy was making, but also issues that came up in our own research in Makana in particular, around tensions between the different role players, particularly between administrators, municipal managers, municipal councils, what those relationships look like. And it was interesting to hear you mention, to speak about the fulfillment of vacant positions, because that's also something that came up a lot in our research around how water rights activists need to focus also on campaigning around the fulfillment of vacant positions. But as you say, that's obviously often quite politically charged terrain. And then, of course, how administrators are kind of parachuted into what must be quite frequent trust deficits between communities and councils. And I'm sure that's something that Ayanda can shed more light on as well. So Ayanda, I'll hand over to you to speak about the experiences of UPM and your partners in what it's been like to tirelessly and continuously push for some kind of meaningful change in Makana. Ayanda, are you with us? Seems like we might just have, he might just have dropped off the call. So I'll ask Ed to just work on getting him back on the call so long. While we wait, Ed, did you want to chip in there? No, okay. All right, while we wait just to sort out the tech issues and get Ayanda back on, we're going to open up for Q&A shortly. So I see there's one or two questions already in the chat, but please feel free to post any questions there, or comments, even if it's just a comment in response to what the presenters have said. One thing I did want to do is, and then let me just switch my video back on. One of the people in the webinar with us today is Nick Hamer, who has worked at the Institute for Water Research at Rhodes and with the Environmental Monitoring Group, and has done quite a lot of research into Makana in particular. Nick, if you're with us, do you want to just unmute your mic and just share your input, any kind of comments or reflections you have around the Makana story?
Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Lisa, and yeah, looking forward to reconnected. Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I mean, I'm now based in Cape Town, but as you said, I was working at the Institute for Water Research back during the administration. So yeah, I think at the time it seemed like, you know, it was one of these times when you saw quite a lot of optimism, and I think, you know, to come and go with time. But yeah, there was this opportunity for people from civil society to come together, and you know, my recollection is of, you know, of quite a lot of people in Makana from different backgrounds coming together to try and work with the administrator and this intervention to try and make things work. So yeah, that was the sort of hopeful side of things. But yeah, as Pam alluded to, the kind of relationship between people and the council was fraught. But yeah, my reflection of it was that ultimately the process itself became quite frustrating from a sort of voluntary participation side, because there was no sense of change taking place from the interventions that occurred. So I mean, just one example I was thinking of was there's one of the task teams, we were just trying to get clarity on what the city's waste management plans were in terms of which areas were going to be looked after by the litter picking crews, and the administration team with Mr. Mpahla taking the lead on this. He quite consistently over a period of several weeks requested that basic information be supplied by the person responsible, but that was never forthcoming. So, you know, we'd see these seemingly innocuous requests for basic information to be shared, which was something that people wanted to work in partnership on, because obviously, you know, there's a mutual interest in keeping the city streets free of rubbish. But yeah, there was just didn't seem to be that opportunity to come up with partnerships collaboratively. And my other reflection, or
sorry, Nick, can I just interrupt you there?
Sure.
We're going to be a little short on time, so if I can just ask you to wrap up your input in the next minute or so.
No, that's fine. Yeah, the only other point I was thinking of was that there was there was also a lot of processes around the water intervention, and there didn't seem to be follow-up on those interventions. So one of them was assessing all the water meters in Makana, and that highlighted a massive water loss issue. And that issue has never been, as far as I'm aware, been satisfactorily resolved. So there's huge water losses in Makana, and that ties in with the billing issue. So I'm not entirely clear whether the 400 million intervention, you know, takes that sort of issue into account. And so the financial side plays into the kind of intervention that's needed. That's enough from me. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Nick. I think we might have Ayanda back. Ayanda, are you with us? Ayanda, could you unmute if you can hear us? Okay, maybe not. So while we continue to sort that out, I'll hand over to Atandiwe to
right
speak.
here.
Oh, there's Ayanda.
I'm right here.
Are you here?
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks. Please go ahead, Ayanda.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, Diabolis as a spam. It's not any form of presentation, but I'm just throwing loose ideas. Hopefully, they will be able to shape these ideas into a conversation. Speaking on the question of water crisis in Makana, I've got minutes in front of me that I've sent to Lisa and to Tato. It's a meeting on water and sanitation that was held on the 5th of May 2016. But if you take a look at the minutes, I am reading 2 paragraphs from the letter or minutes. Regarding sanitation, Mr. Mlenzana stated that Makana only has 6 qualified plumbers. Both water treatment works, Belmont Valley and Mayfield, are operating substantially beyond their capacity. For example, Belmont Valley is supposed to have a maximum capacity of 5 megaliters per day, but normal demand runs at 7. Then the report continues. Then the report says he outlined plans to use the Department of Water Sanitation funding of 72 million to increase the Mayfield capacity to 10 megaliters per day by the end of 2017. A further 2.5 million funding will be used towards a study to assess what needs to be done at the Belmont Valley. Mr. Mlenzana stated that Makana is well aware that there are leaks everywhere around the town, and that Department of Water and Sanitation have provided 60 million rand to start the process of renewal and increasing pipe capacity. He also mentioned that 42 million rand allocated to eradicating reliance on the bucket system. But there's also a further pledge of 140 million rand from the Eastern Cape ECDC. But my point that you realize that this amount of monies mentioned, and some of these monies have been. The reality of the matter is that we do not have of the working class people living in the township as far as water is concerned. CISPAM would also remember the DBSA loan of about 50 million rand. There were also a mention in 2013, the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation mentioned that they had given our municipality about 98 million rand. So I'm saying in mention of all these monies, but if you go closer, I think it was only 2 years back or only last year when the very same Mr. Mlenzana, there was the report about him of fraud and corruption, and the municipality was advised to charge him. Charging him because of corruption relating to these monies. There were negotiations with him, and I think he was paid about a 2 months, if not 3 months salary, and was advised to resign. It was very clear that he ought. Before him, there was Mr. Mialato, who was director of infrastructure. He was implicated heavily on the Kabuso Deming report. He was also advised that he must resign because of the Kabuso report was really implicating him very seriously. So that's one matter that I could say on the water situation in Makanda, to say that there have been all these attempts. The reality of the matter, money has been pumped into municipality. I'm not arguing that it's enough or not enough, but I'm saying we haven't seen any change. 2 weeks back, we did not have water for a week. 2 weeks back, we did not have water for a week. That's number one. But number two, coming into the case with these realities that we are subjected to as the residents of Makana. When the judgment was read out and released by Judge Stretch, the Premier at that point haven't even read the report. The judgment of dissolution. But he said, we are going to appeal. They haven't even read, to say we haven't read the report when we have read the report. Now the matter is at the Supreme Court of Appeal. They have petitioned the Supreme Court of Appeal. I think to me it is a disgrace, because if you look at the judgment, You look at the issues that are being raised by the applicant, which is UPN, challenge the facts, whether it's water, whether it's sewer. You'd remember that Legal Resource recently won a case. Legal Resource has taken up on another case because of the dam. I'm saying nothing has changed. And I think the pillars of any local as Permiak was saying, the participation of the residents is very clear in the affairs of the municipality. Also, the question of openness, those are some of the pillars of any successful government, whether one could think of the Workers' Party 1985 but I'm saying, if you look at the municipality appealing the case, they are negating a negation of distraction, negating the very same fundamentals or principles of the local government. They are saying these pillars of local important. We are only concerned about the precedent. Meaning we are taking away the power from the people. People must just be instruments in the hands of the party. As I am concluding, I think if you look at the amounts that I've mentioned, the crisis that has been continuing unabated, including the judgment that said you should hang your heads in shame. It is very clear to me that the politicians, it is very clear to me, they have no interest in making sure that the local government does work and the local government does work for the people. So you are taking away, because that's what the appeal that seek to do. You are taking away the agents of our people. Because if there are about 24,000 people that voted in the previous local government elections, and you have 20,000 people petitioning the courts to say dissolve this municipality, where do you get the mandate? Where do you get the mandate to say we are going to oppose or we are going to appeal the ruling? So I'm saying, I think to me there are those issues that to me of the powers be, not having any appetite, not having any interest in make sure these local government work. They work in favor of our people, that our lives as the Black working class, wherever we are, can change for better. I mean, the Auditor General report makes this very clear in his opening remarks that, I was just throwing in some of the ideas. I hope we can shift them into discussion. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Ayanda. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, to share the perspectives of the communities and activists that have been campaigning in Makanda and Makana more broadly for many, many years, and sharing your sense of frustration at the fact that we are now years down the line with very little tangible change. And for making the incredibly important point around the need for those most affected by service delivery issues to be included and to participate in the process of addressing challenges like this. You also pick up on the appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. It is an interesting move by the municipality. You know, I've heard some kind of commentators refer to the fact that wouldn't the money be better spent on just addressing the problem rather than continuing to fight the court battle? On the other hand, this is a precedent-setting case, as it is the first case in which a court has ordered dissolution of a municipal council. And so an important one for other municipalities and other communities in other areas to watch. But certainly the High Court judge has been quite vehement in her critique of the conduct of the municipality. I attended the leave to appeal hearing before her with a number of my colleagues, and that was very clear that she, I think, agreed with your sentiment that it was fairly outrageous that the municipality was attempting to appeal this judgment at all, but it is, of course, their right to do so. We'll at this point hand over to Atandire to give us the media perspective. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And Lisa and the SERI team, thank you so much for opening up this opportunity for us to actually have this discussion. And I think for me, from the media perspective, the media side, I'm a journalist. I've been covering local municipalities for years, I think for close to a decade now. And I think most of my colleagues out there who work as journalists, they cover a lot of local government issues as well. And heading to the upcoming elections next year, I think there'll be a focal point once again. I think from my experience, and I'm just going to touch on a couple of points here. I'm not going to take too long, and I think we've just got not too much time to just open up to everybody else and ask questions and have more broader discussion. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of points, basically what the media's role should be in some of these communities, especially as one of the first ports of call that communities have when a particular issue is not being dealt with, and secondly, what our role should be going forward, and essentially just touch a bit on as well what happens to a council when it does get dissolved, and how would that work, and how should the media be reporting on some of these issues going forward. I think for me, and from my personal experiences as a journalist on the ground, and I'm thinking about numerous municipalities, not just in the Eastern Cape, in the Free State, in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, where we've covered municipalities that are broken. What Tracy said has resonated with me, that interventions come in quite late. By the time we go in there, communities have already possibly tried to get assistance from the different municipalities or the different members whom they had voted into council, and nobody is assisting them, whether it is issues around clean water, basic services that they need, clean water, sanitation, a library, a road, municipal health services, and communities are not getting that. They get frustrated. And what we've found going into a lot of these municipalities, the simple fact that there's either corruption that has happened, or there's financial mismanagement, or simply a very low or minimal knowledge of fiscal legislation in that particular municipality. And that all rests on the council. A lot of this rests on the council. And if the council is not able to put a proper budget together. There was a court case about 2008 or a bit earlier than that, that said that council should be able to put a budget together. And when it does not, when it is not able to do that, then council is not fulfilling their particular mandate in that particular municipality. Now, if the financial issues in a municipality are not sorted out, if the financial issues in a municipality are not dealt with, and there's financial mismanagement, and these are things that the AG has brought up over and over again, and I think Ayanda, right at the end of his discussion, was trying to speak to that, to what the Auditor General has highlighted over and over. If those financial legislative frameworks within a municipality are not functioning, where people can get away with irregular expenditure, wasteful expenditure, where members within the council and within the municipality itself, civil servants, are not following the proper supply chain management legislation. This is how it all starts to break down. When there's not enough money to go around, and weirdly enough, this is what the AG had said in the last report that he put out on municipalities, on MFMA this year. He says there's just not enough to go around. And if there's not enough to go around in these municipalities, that means specific services cannot be fulfilled. That means that there can be no infrastructural treatment where we fix particular blocked drains, where we fix particular infrastructure, and because there is no money, because money is being squandered. And for me, going through some of the reporting that I have done on different municipalities, that seems to constantly be the nub of the issue. That seems to be possibly where it all starts to break down, that it's either based on corruption or it's financial mismanagement, or actually the people who are making the decision are not aware of what they're actually supposed to be doing and how to actually supposed to be budgeting. Because there are some councils in some of the stories that I've covered where a council will sit together and decide that this is the budget that we're going to have, this is what we're going to spend money on this year, this is what we're going to refurbish and build and fix, but there is no money within the municipality. So they're busy signing off on particular budget, yet the municipality itself doesn't have the money. They don't, their infrastructural grants are not enough for what they want to do. Their taxes, their rates and taxes being paid do not cover that. They have soaring debt, whether to ESCOM or whether to other service providers. They're not paying the service providers on time. And then they are left without any money to fulfill any of the services that they are meant to. So moving from that point, where municipalities don't have the money to fulfill their mandates, then it becomes where citizens in those particular municipalities can't access services. And this is where citizens, I think as the media, we come in. And I've found that on numerous occasions that residents and citizens and people who need services from these municipalities actually have found that they can't get them, and hence they contact us to say, what am I supposed to do? And I think as the media, we play quite an important role in educating citizens and residents living in those different municipalities, in educating them about where they can get information, what their municipality is supposed to be offering them, what provincial government is supposed to be offering them, and the next level, national government. Because I think a lot of people do not understand the difference between what they need to get from where. And so they spend a lot of their efforts and their time trying to go from one department to the next, yet essentially, one of the first steps is speaking to their councillors. And I think as the media, that's something that we need to start working towards. When we write stories like this about municipalities that are completely broken and the corruption and the mismanagement and what the AG says, to start also explaining, as a citizen, this is where you fall in. This is where your responsibility is. To get together with other citizens, to go and ask the questions. What the role that Mr. Ayanda Gogo has fulfilled in his particular community is very important, and it's supposed to be happening in a lot of the other communities, in the Val, for instance, in Tetlabeng, for instance. These are some of the municipalities that are at their financial collapse right now, and nothing is working in there. And you find that there aren't any kind of activist people coming together, community members coming together to start asking those questions, to start pushing their particular municipality to give them those answers, until we get to a point where, if need be, the entities go to court to force municipalities. And that's one of the most saddest things, when another arm of government has to force government arm that's supposed to be giving services to actually be able to be able to give people their basic services. And none of none of these services that are being requested are above and beyond what it is just essential to live on. We're speaking specifically about electricity, about water, about sanitation. These are the basic rights enshrined in the Constitution that these municipalities are supposed to be providing. But we're finding on, and in every case that we go into, that they're not being provided on the basis that actually there is no money. And then we start digging around in terms of why there is no money. And communities do not understand how much power they have and how much more fighting they need to do to get those basic services. And I think that is a role that the media needs to start fulfilling a lot better. And then when we get to a particular case like Makana, and where a court finally decides that the municipality is not doing what they are meant to be doing, and so to dissolve a whole council. I've been going through the judgment itself and the order itself, and reading up on a lot of it, and trying to understand the intricacies of what this means for our local governments going forward. And I try to speak to a couple of people in terms of how then, once a council is dissolved, how then do we move forward? And then will the dissolution of a council actually mean that the new council that's voted in 90 days or 3 months, the new council that's voted in, will it be able to do anything differently? And will communities still be able to get their services even after the dissolution of that particular council? And a lot of people are still grappling with what happens after the dissolution. How long does an administrator come in for? And are administrators effective if they are not given the tools and the finances and the support that they need to? But at the end of the day, if there is an administrator for more than the 90 days that the administrator is meant to be there for, what happens to the community and their discussions with their council members? And then how does the administrator at the end of the day then know what the community needs, besides fixing the right now problems? If we can't get a council after 90 days, because even if we do, there's no money to fix anything. And as Pam had explained, so these are very fascinating concepts that I think as journalists, we need to start delving into and start finding the way forward, so that communities, I think in this particular case, the Makana case, is a case study and a roadmap for many communities that are finding themselves in this situation. Because as according to the Auditor General, only 8% of municipalities actually ever had clean audits in the past financial year, I think 2018, 2019. This means that the majority of them are broken, and most of them are at financial collapse, where they've got nothing left that they can use to either build roads or to fix infrastructure. Makana becomes a case study and a roadmap for many of those municipalities that fall into that 92% that is essentially broken. And we need to start asking those questions and building an understanding of how these municipalities and community members can come together to ensure that they still get the most basic of services from these different municipalities. And I'm really looking forward to a lot of the discussion that will happen going forward here. And for me as a journalist as well, to start working on what I need to start writing about, to educate communities. And it's not just in the Eastern Cape. In Gauteng alone, there was one municipality that actually had a clean audit. There are municipalities across the country that need this kind of discussion to happen. And thank you very much, Lisa.
Great, thanks, Atandiwe. As you say, Makana has indeed been a roadmap in various ways, both of what incredibly organized and effective community mobilization can look like. And also, as you say, about the important role of the media. I think there's been really great coverage of the Makana crisis, and many of those of the journalists contributing and generating that coverage, I think, are with us in the webinar today. but also lots of lessons to learn about what not to do going forward. So we now open up for a bit of discussion. There have been a couple of questions and comments in the chat so far. So let me just summarize a few of those, and then we'll turn over to our panelists to give any responses that they have. So there was an initial comment or question from Nick about the utility of a constitutional challenge to Section 139 and about whether that will improve its implementation. Tracy had given some response in the chat, but also just if any of the panelists wanted to add to that. And then a comment from Derek around the respective roles of local and district municipalities, and the fact that a lot of the national funding from DWIS in the form of municipal infrastructure grants and the like are channeled at district level, and so might be kind of cutting out local municipal councils from that, and how we navigate that tension. And then a comment from Sipatise about how we understand the concept of municipal autonomy in the context of the fact that municipal councils are democratically elected structures, and how do we defer to that while still conducting oversight over municipalities. And then a comment from Lucas about the specifics of the upgrade to the James Kleinhans water treatment works, which is one of the key, part of the key infrastructure responsible for water supply in Makanda, and the fact that the desperately needed upgrades to that treatment works have been delayed and at some points even abandoned over the years. And we know that more recently, a huge chunk, I think it's about a third of the allocated funding for that upgrade was rechanneled towards a COVID emergency water supply in Makanda. So the chances of that infrastructure being repaired sort of fading further and further into the distance. So there's a couple more in the chat, but let me pause there and just hand over to our panelists for any comments or responses to those questions and comments.
If I could say something there. Yeah, I think, you know, Section 139, for all the fact that it's quite maligned and seen as generally useless, and that is actually, I think, a very good statute. The problem is it's been implemented very poorly. You know, COGT has never really issued really good regulations around it. The MFMA deals with some of the issues around Section 139.5, but actually makes the situation worse, because in the relevant parts of the MFMA, they actually confuse what's a discretionary and a mandatory intervention. So we've got a whole lot of sort of supporting legislation which is making everything worse, and then this kind of, you know, sort of inability of COGTA and Treasury to work together. We saw the minister in COGTA saying a couple of weeks ago, well, COGTA is responsible for sort of operational things in local government, and Treasury is responsible for financial things. But the reality on the ground, as we all know, is that these things are deeply interconnected. You know, it's very difficult to just, this is why so many support programs don't work. It's because people want the kind of problems to fit into a neat little prearranged box. And that isn't happening at all. So what we've got is the situation where the courts are becoming more and more involved in deciding what an intervention should look like. But the problem there is sometimes they're doing a good job, and sometimes they're doing a bad job, and sometimes the lawyers that are going to court are doing a bad job because they haven't understood the statute either. So it really is something, I think, where we need to go back to basics. And at the heart of this really is about understanding that the autonomy of local government is not limitless. Section 27 of the Constitution doesn't say you have a right to water unless your municipality decides it would rather spend the money on something else. You know, and this really is the fundamental issue.
Thanks, Tracy. Comments from Pam or Ayanda or Atandiwe?
Thank you. Just small points. One is just on this point that Tracy made, on that these things are interconnected. So we do need to take the whole of government approach. And it is never intended in law that, and if you look in the Constitution, it doesn't say that COCTA will intervene. It says the provincial government and national government at a certain time will intervene. And I think for me, that's one of the things that we need to look at, because it is in addressing the problem, because what is the responsibility of the whole of provincial government and of national government in either supporting or making the interventions that are necessary, other than just passing the resolution by executive councils to say there must be an intervention. So I think that's the one thing. But that presupposes that government knows, and we know this, how to work collaboratively. Because the issue of TEFs and looking at my own mandate and not collaborating is a big issue. So it as much as I think there is attempts to address that, I think there is we're very far from that, addressing the issue of collaboration. I had made the point about the need for money, and it's part of the intervention. But I think if I look at the chat, the amounts that have been put on this, I mean, relatively speaking, quite a bit of amount of money has been put into Makana. The question is, why is the problem still not solved? Why are we still sitting with them? And I think for me, there's a couple of things. There's an issue of capacity. Okay, the wrong people are being appointed to oversee these things. I did make the example of the director of technical services. By the way, Ayanda, the one that you're referring to, Mr. Mayalato, was not only implicated in the Gabuso report. He was also found wanting on some of the things. And when I issued him, in fact, he got wind that we're going to discipline him that day. The next thing, he gave us a 1 hour resignation, and the next thing we're looking for him, we couldn't find him. And he had left, and there was a whole debate about whether we're still entitled to get into his pensions, but my contract came to an end. And then so the issue of capacity and who gets appointed, I think it's also about, for me, also about patronage and corruption, because the wrong people are appointed, knowing that you can put I mean, if you look at James Kleinams, the reality is that there was no capacity in that municipality to oversee that project. So money was made available, and there were no right skills. There could be other things that I play. I don't have the details, but knowing what I know, something else, I wouldn't put it past the whole contract that something else was at play. And then the last point I would like to make, which to your point, Lisa, about the role of communities. Actually, in law, Section 2 of the Systems Act, in its definition of the municipality, it says it includes 3 components: the municipal council, the administration, and the community. And oftentimes, councillors or the 2 legs of what the municipality is often like to define it outside of the communities. It is in law, and therefore the obligation on municipal councils and administrations to work with the communities is in law. So it needs to be followed, it needs to be enforced, and that it's not like they're doing a favor when they are involving communities in decision making, because the law says they must work in collaboration with. Okay, I'm going to end it at that.
Thanks, Pam.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly add a note to what Pam said, just to add in there. She mentioned specific things about corruption, a lack of skills, and a lack of funds as well. This is textbook case for numerous other municipalities, as I'd mentioned, in the Vaal, in Tlhabeng, in other areas of the Free State textbook, where there's this basis of these corrupt or financial mismanagement that happens, then that just leads to these communities not being able to access any of the services that they're supposed to be getting. And I'm just concerned that with many of these cases, will we just simply need to go to court to force these municipalities to do what they're supposed to be doing? And will we just have to use this particular case study as one to use and bash council members over their head with, to ensure that municipalities are providing their services? It's just a thing I was thinking, just a thought that came into my head as Pam was speaking.
Thanks, Athandiwe. Intractable questions. We're coming up for 12, so I wanted to just invite Ayanda to give any last comments that you have, Ayanda, and perhaps if I can just throw in a question at this point as well to you, is that one of the things that struck us when we were looking at Makana was around the alliances that had been created between UPM and various other groups, residents associations, other kind of civil society collectives, organizations that are part of roads, and often quite sort of unlikely coalitions emerging. So any final thoughts you have, including on the role of coalitions and alliances in really keeping the pressure on and building the evidence to bring cases like this?
Thanks. I think.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I think that.
Go ahead, Ayanda. Sorry, Pam. We're just moving over to Ayanda now.
All right. On the question of alliances, I think there comes a point in our lives or in history when we realize that it's important to defend what scholars have termed a liberal democracy, and consolidate it. But I think when we do that, as we have done in our city, we are quite aware that we must not lose sight of the agenda that is pro-poor, the agenda that is for the working class. Because you would remember, when we do not have water, we don't have many options as the Black working class in the township. It's a matter that we do not have water in a city where the unemployment is estimated to be at 70%. If you are living in a bubble on this side of the town, when you don't have water, you do have an option that you can still fit within this commodification of water. You can still buy water. But I think there comes a time, as I've said, where our humanity as people brings us together to say we have to defend what we have. Then we must also repel, or we must fight against what we see as the spiral down, as we have seen in Makana. Because with the state of the roads, with the state of water, and it means your university is also not safe. It means the schools around the bubble are also not safe. It means all of us are not safe. Then it becomes important that we've got to defend what it is and deepen it. And while we are confronting corruption head on, that's number one. So I think it's also pursuing those politics of humanity, but also driven by love for our city, driven by the love for our city and for our country. Make no mistake that we fight every day, but we've got unending and undying love for this country. We've got unending and undying love for our city and for humanity. Though it is something that you do not see on a daily basis. If our action were not moved by the feelings of love, wouldn't have taken this route that at times will even put our lives on the line. That's number one. So I think so. So I think that's what we have seen.
To wrap up a little bit because we're short of time now.
Okay, that's number two. I concur with Suspem, the question of kind of employment in our city is huge, like in all municipalities. And it's something that we have to fight corruption. And as we have seen with the Auditor General's report, there's a question of corruption. The question of this municipality, the test, the fight. Suspem would also remember when the Council of Provinces was here at the City Hall. The COGTA was quite adamant in saying that no, it is the turf of COGTA. So the Council of Provinces no business in Makana. So those issues continue to be there.
Thanks, Ayanda. And sorry to cut you in the interest of time, but we're past 12 and I know we promised to end by 12. So I just wanted to thank everyone for your time and your input. We hope that the discussions have furthered our knowledge about Section 139 interventions and in the process enhanced our collective ability to confront the crisis of local government in South Africa. We're very aware that there are a number of other communities in various parts of the country that are watching the Makana story very closely in order to learn lessons for their own campaigning. And so a couple of, just a few brief takeaways from today. The first, provincial interventions need to happen sooner rather than later. Second, it's important to get the correct diagnosis so that the response can be tailored accordingly. Third, dissolving a municipal council without addressing the underlying financial issues is just not going to work. And we need to explore in more detail about what happens when a council is in fact dissolved. Fourth, administrators must be given adequate support, and it's critical that in the process of that there's clarity about who answers to who. Fifth, the supporting institutions at both provincial and national government level, and including SELGA. There was a comment about SELGA as well. We haven't had a chance to talk about them, but certainly they have a role to play here, and that all of those supporting institutions need to come to the party and do their jobs. And lastly is really about the incredibly important role of communities in both catalyzing and shaping responses. So special thanks to all our panelists today. We really appreciate your time and energy and expertise, and also to our partners at End Water Poverty and the Mail and Guardian. If you would like to join the fourth and final webinar in this series, it's taking place in 2 weeks on the 17th of November at 10:30, and we'll be tackling the hot topic of water self-supply, looking particularly at the work of the Harry Smith Water Heroes. And you can either follow SERI on Twitter or check out their website for further details about how to register for that one. So thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.